Good morning, everyone. This is Mark Molina, CEO, Molina Leadership and Business Development Solutions. Today, I have with me a very handsome gentleman by the name of David Loveall. He is a leader extraordinaire. He is a developer. He is a landlord. He is a pastor with an international ministry. He had his own photography business for many years. He has run half marathons and marathons. A very busy, active man who is responsible for much of the development in downtown Springfield, Oregon. For those that were here post 2008 housing market crash, David cashed in his retirement. He and his wife cashed in their retirement, and he began to execute a vision he had to create life and vibrancy in downtown Springfield. And today I want to hear his story. I want to hear some of the things that concern him. We are in the midst of a pandemic in phase one of reopening, but we have individuals like David who we're in the midst of building, constructing, carrying construction loans, having tenants, and there's been some significant fallout. We want to hear his story. We want to give him a chance to tell us things we might not have considered and might not know about the pressures from his perspective. David, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Beautiful morning in Arizona. I'm glad you've got a break and getting some rest.
Well, I was going to maybe record that introduction that you just made so graciously and maybe send you a Christmas card. That was some of the best stuff I've heard in a long time.
Well, the good news is it is recorded and it'll be posted and you will have it. So let's talk about, you know, a lot of us don't understand who are not developers. Now, the Springfield Chamber of Commerce uh, you were part of a focus group that was called Meet the Developers, where you gave presentations on what you went through. So, from a layman's perspective, meaning my perspective, what would you say to those who don't know much about what it means to be a developer? And then we'll get into some of the other difficulties in the pandemic.
But what it means to be a developer, that's a really good question because, most people that I talk to have either a very polarized opinion of what a developer is. It's either someone who comes in and rapes, pillages, and plunders and screws the city for everything they're worth and makes money and skips off to Arizona and vacations, or it's somebody who really has a heart for the city and works collaboratively with people that have the same vision and they work to find really good solutions to economic development. And I think, those are really two ends of the spectrum. I don't think you're going to find a developer anywhere in the middle who's just kind of passe on both ends. They're either passionate about making money and getting all they can out of people, or they're passionate about people and downtown and the areas they redevelop, and they have a heart and soul for it. And I think that's where we are. Bob and I, my partner, Masaka Properties. I, as a high school kid, worked at Fifth and Main Street in Gerlach's camera store. I was hired there at 15, and my mom took me after school every day until I got my driver's license at 16, and I worked there until I joined the Navy in 1979. So, I've been downtown Springfield for a lot of years and have always seen Springfield suffer. I
Mhm.
mean, ever since I can remember, Springfield has been the first to suffer in any downturn and the last to succeed out of any downturn.
Mhm.
And so it was just an opportunity for us to finally, just by chance, I guess, I was looking for a place to house my photo studio back in the day. And I'd been looking for a building for 15 years and drove by Main Street one day and there was a for sale sign on the Washburn building, which is now the Washburn building. And I bought it from Metco Property Management, Ron Perkins and Stu Burge. As you know, some of those people at Stu Burge, and back in the day, he was kind of a salty old guy. I love him a lot. But he gave me an opportunity to buy that building, and from then it just kind of, opportunity kept coming, and then the term developer gets hanged on you, and here you are. So it's kind of one of those things that opportunity followed opportunity.
Well, I think it's really important, especially within the context of this conversation, is you are from here. You're from Springfield, Oregon. You were raised here. You worked here.
Right.
You went off to your time in military service. Well, hello, Mrs.
That's my
Lovell.
little wife, Nita. Hi, this is my other partner.
Hello, good
I'm on
morning.
vacation. I look like homeless.
It's okay. We don't judge. Have a good time. So you grew up typical, wonderful American story, right? The American story. You find a job where you live, where you work. You're part of the community. You grow up. You join military. You go to your military service. You come back, and by the way, I know that your military uniform still fits you. So good job, buddy.
Well, it's 13 button pants. There's like three buttons that fit. The rest are kind of out of the hole.
Yeah. And so you come home and you're now you've owned a business, you own businesses downtown. You're a successful man and you've earned it the hard way. You grew up working, you grew up discovering that work ethic, that vision that you have for downtown is because it's part of your life. It's part of your history and your family's history.
Yeah.
Um, why did you feel that it was so, why is it so important to you, David, to execute what your plan of action, your vision along with your partner, the revitalization and redevelopment of what downtown could be?
Well, I think you just look at the progress that downtown's made in the last 3 years, and it's not just been my partner and I, Bob, doing all this work. We've had super contractors, we've had business people that have had their visions that have come to us. So what I think is really great about it, it's a collaborative effort of a lot of dreamers. But here's the thing: when you start to dream, if there's not someone who really invests in you and your dream's not going to happen. Your dreams are always a partnership. Even when you're starting your own business of your own, you're gonna have to know somebody who's gonna have to give you some valuable advice or some, lift up to get you to where you need to be on that next rung of the ladder. And so that's where downtown has really come to play. And the other thing about downtown is this. You mentioned that I'm a pastor, so I pastor 316 Ministries. We do international ministry out of Uganda, and that whole story is what evolved, and we end up adopting our son, who's 21, from Uganda. So there's a whole story there. But the thing about developing downtown, it's more than just economic development. It's spiritual and cultural development because like that block party we had last summer down there. I remember just thinking maybe we'd get 500 people to show up for a block party to celebrate the opening. We had like 2,000 people, and we had glasses that said the block on them. We had this whole brand. But the thing I remember most about that night was sitting at the table and people coming by saying, I've been praying for this block and this downtown for years. Our churches have come down here with prayer groups and they marched around the blocks where all the strip joints and the bars were. And they said, I never thought I would see this happen in my lifetime. And so, that's not even a developer kind of comment. That's a spiritual comment about how a community who's committed to weeding out some of the things that we've kind of looked the other way on and deciding that we're going to take back territory that's been taken away by dark forces, if you will. I'm saying that, when we were remodeling the upstairs of the Washburn building with those two apartments, and there was a collective group of people that the Glenwood and Eugene and Springfield police departments were all trying to figure out how to, stem the drug problem. And every day at 2:30, I could set my watch, Mark. There's been 30 or 40 people would march from Glenwood down Main Street to this bar, get whatever they were getting. I'm sure it wasn't margaritas, and they would march back under the bridge. And it was just a real scourge that just had to have. Somebody had to do something, and so that's really where I think this real internal satisfaction comes from me, just hearing people say, wow, I just never thought it could be this safe, this nice, whatever word they use.
Yeah, I think it's important that for those of us that knew it when it was strip bars and bars and the darkness and the violence.
Yeah.
And I remember when I used to run downtown early in the morning years ago, I always had to be on strict, situational awareness at all times because I would run early in the morning, and I do remember all the prostitutes out there and the people swinging in to pick them up, and the people that were highly inebriated on the sidewalks, and the people that were obviously out there, excuse me, making the drug transactions. That is not uh, hyperbole. That happened. That was real. That was downtown Springfield.
Right. Right.
And so now it is a very uniquely developed place, apartments, restaurants, grocery store, barbershop, specialty restaurants, specialty shops, where did this vision for these types of businesses, are you part of that attraction of businesses? Are you making parts of those determinations about who you're going to rent to?
Most definitely. Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. I mean, um, one of the initial thoughts was, I mean, let me back up just a minute. Here's the thing. All of the properties that we bought in were not for sale, with the exception of Washburn. Washburn was the only property that had a for sale sign on it. All the other properties we bought in, the 336 building, Cornbread's 338 building, which looks like it's the same building, but it's two separate ones. The 345 main building, which houses the new Lovely Cafe. Now, all of those buildings were not for sale when we purchased them. But but as we decided to say, look, if downtown Springfield is going to change, it's going to change because people are going to come and move down there and live down there. Now, when people live in an area, just by the fact that they live there, it's going to have certain support facilities around there. So, Planktown came in about 5 years after we bought Washburn. We bought Washburn, I think, in '06, just before the crash. So, when they came in, that kind of started the stem turning a little bit. So we knew that if we could attract a few more restaurants, that would be a good deal. But in that half block area, most people don't know there's 34 apartments in that half block area, just between 3rd and 4th Street, Pioneer Parkway in Maine, 34 apartments. So you figure 34 apartments, even if those are single dwellings, that's 35 people, potentially 65 or 70 people that would live in a half block area. Now you get that many people who have what I call skin in the game. That's a term that I'm going to use a lot, is skin in the game. Whenever someone has skin in the game and they feel that their presence is valuable and worth investing into, things change. And so if we could just get people to live down there, then enough value, skin in the game, people would want things to change. So when we first we had Cornbread came in, signed a lease. Bartolotti's came from a food truck, came in and signed a lease. And then we had that space left over where the Main Street Market is for a little over a year. So, a typical investor would say, we got to get anything in here. Well, I'll tell you what, I had 5 separate phone calls from the marijuana industry people. They went, oh, trust me, Mr. Loveall, we have good marijuana business. It's very clean, very classy, the whole 9 yards. Anyway, so I had offers for 3 times the amount of rent I was asking. So instead of having like a $3,000 a month, say, rent, they were going to pay me $9,000 to $10,000 a month to sell weed there. But it was just like, you know what? Yeah, from an investor standpoint, that'd have been great money. I could have been, in my pocket and on my way, but it just wasn't what the spirit was driving it. It wasn't what was needed down there. What was needed was a grocery store. And, Steve at Bartolotti's had a friend of his across the street at his friendly location, which was Aaron, the proprietor of the Main Street Market. Got to talking to her, and market was what my wife and I and my partners were wanting to put down there because we felt that's what would be the best addition down there. Because not only would it attract the people living there, but then the periphery Washburn Historic District, closest market was, Safeway about a mile down the road. Mm-hmm. So we really, yes, we've been very purposeful about who we attract down there. Cornbread was a very purposeful addition because, the vegan crowd is a little bit different than the pizza crowd, So we're really, Lovely Cafe, when we interviewed them for their rental agreement was, hey, what kind of food are you bringing? And Josh was a professional skateboarder. So we had that kind of niche youth market that we really didn't have. So we're really conscious about what groups of people we're trying to attract down there. And I think that awareness and that strategy is working really well.
Well, it definitely has that feel of this retro feel.
Yeah.
Downtown Springfield, which it's invigorating and it's attractive and it is attention getting and it almost beckons the people that when you're driving through, it's time to pull over, stop, take a walk down Main Street sidewalks and figure out what is going on because this is fantastic.
Yeah, that's because you have a really good architect on your team.
Yeah.
Campfire Collaborative, Jenna and her peeps. She's just an historic. I call her my historical nerd. Whenever we try something in downtown, she researches the history and finds out about this and what it looks like, and then we, test colors, and so all of that branding look that you're describing is definitely intentional. And you're right. It makes people feel comfortable. It makes them feel invited. It makes them feel warm. It's very intentional. And having good people on your team is vital because I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah. I hear you, brother. So what is the name of that firm?
Campfire Collaborative Architecture. Jenna Fribley. Yeah, Campfire Collaborative. Yeah.
And they're
And
local?
she has the office right to the west, the building immediately to the west of the Lovely building. It
Oh,
used to be an
very
old optometry shop. And so
yes.
she used to be in the Fertilab building on the second floor. And I would convince her, you need to move downtown with me, be my neighbor.
So let's talk about those buildings that were not for sale.
Yeah.
What actions, strategies did you use or take to create interest in those previous business or building owners wanting to sell to you all?
The first, that's a great question. The first building we were looking at was the old Econocells building, which is 336 Main. When we were building the two apartments above Washburn years and years ago, I realized that they had a Main Street stair access where people could go upstairs from Main Street and access their apartments. And I thought, well, what a cool idea if the two of us would talk and maybe we could punch a hole between the two buildings and I could use his Main Street access to access the apartments above Main Street. Well, evidently they had some bad experiences in the 70s about renting to folks, and they had shut down that entire floor. And that entire floor had been vacant for 30 years of
Oh
8
my goodness.
apartments. So that was unused. It was, and the stuff we moved out of there, I could just tell you stories. We moved out, 60 yards of debris out of there, including, old chemical manufacturing equipment and barrels of oil and motorcycle parts, stolen or not stolen, who knows. But he would have nothing to do with that kind of development. He wouldn't anything to do with it. So that was the Mosers. They owned the Econocells. And so, that kind of milked along for, a decade or more. And this is kind of a funny story. I'm going to hopefully tell it short, but I was in ministry work over in Uganda. And my pastor that I worked with over there, he kept saying, Pastor Loveall, you need to come here more often. You need to make more money in America so you can come to Africa. And I'm like, dude, yeah, it'd be great, but if this guy next door would just sell me his building, I think we could develop that building and put some apartments up there. We can make some more money and I could come visit you more. He goes, Pastor Loveall, we will pray that God will give you the building. I'm like, yeah, right. People are starving in Ethiopia. What's God care about a real estate deal? So I get home and I kid you not, Mark, for 2 weeks, I couldn't sleep. The building just was needling in my head. So finally I said, okay, I'll go down and I'll talk to him. So I cold called, walked into the Econocells, approached the Moser, and I said, hey, you guys have any plans for this building? I mean, what are you doing? And the wife was really funny. She was just like, I was like a vampire coming in at night to suck blood out of her. She was like, ah. But, course of a couple of weeks and we talked and, hey, what do you want in life? Where you at? So we talked about paying his house off and his car and scaling down the business and blah, blah, blah. And so finally I said, hey, why don't I put together an offer? Just put some on paper and take you to dinner. And so we did. And so, that's how that deal was struck. And then the building next to them was owned by their in-laws. So they kind of got in on that. And so we made it all kind of one deal. And then, Bob Miller, my partner, was super good in business. And we were able, between the two of us and with his large help and funds, to, buy the building and rehab it and then get a loan on it. So we weren't really dealing with the normal hoop jumps of trying to find money and construction loans and all that, rigmarole. So it made the process really pretty streamlined in that regard.
So when you purchased that building, did you already have an idea, a vision, and a timeline for what you wanted to do, or how did that unfold for you?
Yeah. The initial vision certainly was the apartments.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the deal we made, the Econocells was going to stay down in that space for 2 years rent free. That was the deal we made. And they decided to move out early. So it kind of, moved forward the bottom remodel a lot quicker. Now, Cornbread came in and signed that lease. And I think that kind of got things rolling. It kind of like, we really didn't have a planned vision for the commercial level at the street level. But when they came in and started, what they needed to do, build that big commercial kitchen and all that. And then we went back and did the whole bathroom block, which is a block of 7 bathrooms that are all European style. It's like one big room with separate little stalls and all that, which I call my Obama bathroom, but that's another joke. So, but anyway, that kind of really started getting things rolling to where, all the places started getting, eked out, and then different tenants were attracted to it. So it kind of a form followed function, I guess.
So just out of curiosity, what attracted Cornbread Cafe to downtown Springfield? What was their interest?
That's a great question for Cherie Walters to answer. I mean, you got to figure she's kind of one of those people that has kind of cornered the creativity on vegan cuisine. I mean, she's made comfort food, which is not really a vegan thing, but she's made it a thing. And when, diners, dives, and whatever that guy's show is, double, triple D or whatever his name is. Yeah. When he came and did a show on their place in Eugene, that place exploded. A 32 seat or whatever it was cafe, it was just busy. And I think she wanted to start some sort of a franchising kind of vision that would be kind of a Southern entertainment kind of comfort food concept. And she wanted to try it there. And, us seeing the possibility of what kind of people she would bring down there, we partnered with her because, landlords are business partners with who they lease to. That's just a fact. And if landlords don't know that, then they shouldn't be landlords. Because if you're not a partner in a business that succeeds, you don't succeed.
Talk to us about what was your responsibility to building out these locations for your tenants? Any specifications that they may have needed for their business, for instance, cornbread cafe, a big commercial kitchen. What about some of the other areas? Do you do that for them, or do they subcontract out?
Well, it's a combination of both. I mean, that's pretty typical in the business, is that either you come in and say, your rent's $1 a foot, and if we build it out for you, your rent's $1.80 a foot over so many years to pay back the loan. So, initially the two ways of doing it: either the tenant comes in, hires their own people, pays for it themselves, or they partner with some kind of build agreement combination with the landlord. And so we've done both of that. But there's also some kind of like, I don't know, I guess you call it industry standard kinds of things. I mean, when you come into a vacant space as a tenant, I mean, you expect an HVAC system, you expect running water, you expect certain things that are already there that, to attract a good tenant, the landlords are usually good at putting those things in. But that's kind of work.
Now, how many of the businesses downtown are you either landlord to or work with to help develop?
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah, all of them. I mean, we've now worked. Well, my wife and I own the Washburn building and the salon next to it. That's a different company, so we own that one. So we partnered with Washburn to help build that building, and the yoga place in the back was my photo studio that I was going to move into, but never did, because 2 weeks prior to finishing that, some couple walked by the alley and begged me to rent it, saying that God had told them that they should rent this space. So it's like, who am I to argue with God? So they rented the space, and I never moved in as a photographer, and that's kind of what led to my early retirement as a photographer. So, but the other businesses that Bob Miller and Mary Miller are two dear friends from California we partnered with. Every business we partnered with and helped. It's cornbread, we helped out a huge amount. Bartolotti's was really pretty good at getting their finances in order. They had a separate architect, but we also helped out with their system developments costs, because that's kind of a number that's kind of a weird one, but that's a different topic entirely. But the city's really good about helping out in the downtown core with system development costs. I will say that, so that's good. And then the market, we put that whole storefront in because, if you recall, there was not an entry door at the time when we bought the building. Way back when there was, but there wasn't. So we spent about $30,000 putting that entryway in with all those sliding cool doors and all that. So, in Loveall Cafe, that was an idea. That was another business prior to them deciding not to lease the property midway. We got about halfway in the tenant improvements, and they decided not to pay their share. And so we opted to not rent to them. So, we did some more stuff with Loveall to help them get in. And then the store next to them, Remembering the Moon, we've always been involved in one form or another.
Now, what about one of my favorites downtown is the Craftsman Barbershop?
Yeah, that's not my building, but that's a cool place.
Yeah, how did just out of curiosity, what a cool retro business in the midst of all the retro feel of downtown. How did that concept come to play? Do you know?
No, I don't. I just think that, culturally, us men need good people to take care of us.
Yeah.
I applaud those guys for taking care of us, and they're good. They're good guys. I mean, here's the thing, quality people attract quality people, even on different levels. And those guys are just really quality people. I love that, the guitar shop, Nate was down there with the guitar thing, he was good, and I'm sorry to see him go, but that place is going to continue to attract what I call maybe community symbiotic kind of people that are just ground level, want to do good by other people kinds of businesses.
I didn't realize that the guitar shop was moving on.
Yeah, it's a vacant space. We're hoping that they're going to get I have an eye on a tenant I think is going to go in there.
Mm.
And there's the other thing too, it's like I've been calling people that I know when they say, hey, do you have anything open? I go, no, but there's this great place across the street. And so I call the owner of the building. And I say, look, this is a great tenant. You should rent from him. And so, I think that's what makes a good community too, is when I'm not trying to be the top guy in the neighborhood. I'm just trying to get all kinds of people successful in the neighborhood, including the people that I don't even own buildings for. So.
Let's go ahead and begin to pivot this conversation just a little bit because you wear many hats. You've worked really, really hard for your successes, you and your wife both, and those that you partner with, and that is something that can never be taken away from you. And that's important to establish because it would be easy to look at David. Ah, David's just got all that money. What does he know? What does
Yeah,
he
no,
care? He's just this guy, and that's not true.
no.
Let's talk a little bit about the pandemic, the effects of the pandemic. Uh, how does that affect the developer? How does that affect, because people would think, oh, he's got money and what does he care? He's got no problems. And what I want to do with these interviews is help us, those of us that don't understand the other side and be able to have reasonable, respectful conversations around the struggles that are impacting us all. How has this pandemic, these shutdown of the economy, what has been happening to you and against what your vision is?
Well, I think that's a twofold question. And one is people, like I said, they think, oh, they're developers, they got all the money in the world. But, we have mortgages on these buildings.
Mhm.
We have expenses, we have trash, we have power, we have maintenance, taxes, all that stuff. Down the line, the people don't turn to us and say, oh, yeah, well, don't worry about your mortgage payments, no big deal. So we still have to budget and make means available for those kinds of expenses. And at the same time, we also have to maintain a heart for people that have lost their jobs. I mean, for example, we had a tenant upstairs of Bartolotti's that both those kids lost their jobs, young couple, and so we just said, hey, okay, so what is it you can pay this month? So send what you can pay, send a letter of what you didn't pay, and when do you think we'll kind of make this up, or if we can make this up, and we'll work it out. So that's been our mode on all of our tenants, including our commercial tenants. Some of the programs that have helped out some of our commercial tenants because they've been closed down for, like Cornbread's been closed down for 2 months now. They got some of the PPP money, which they were able to pay back some of that rent, which helped us out, which helped everybody out. But, that PP money has got some, I don't know, it's got some quirks to it that I'm still kind of ironing out in my head. But just pandemic wise, the other thing too, the issue, not to mention just the economic issue, but I think for me that really gets my hot button pushed is just, is the spirit of how the businesses are reacting to people telling us what we can and can't do and what is essential and what is not essential. And so without hanging my politics out there and having screaming people on Facebook coming at me and all that, my concern is that I'm always one of those hard charging kinds of people that want to push back against the system. I want to push back about what I think is unfair and unjust. And so sometimes I either shoot my mouth off or do something stupid, but I'd rather err on the side of standing up for myself and my tenants and my people than being pushed around and not having a voice. And so I'm feeling like sometimes some of the pandemic has caused our tenants, our commercial people to lose their voice as citizens and as contributing members of society that says, hey, how can you say that my business is not essential? Or how can you say that my small restaurant that only has a capacity to seat 25 people now can only serve 13 people and try to make a profit at half its capacity? So that's kind of what's been gearing in my, grinding in my gears kind of a thing. So those are two things, economics and the voice.
Pushed around not having a voice. That's a pretty powerful statement. Would be from any business developer, any resident of the state, anyone who's trying to enhance viability for others through some type of business. And I think that that's really a couple of things I want to talk about today with you is that reality that you feel that way. You are a professional and since I've known you and I've known you for years, for decades now at least, well, I've known you for at least 15, 16 years.
Yeah.
You are a consummate professional in everything I've ever known you to do. And so passions are good. The engagement process is absolutely necessary. And it's unique because I see you, honestly, David, ever since I've known you, I've always considered you to be a powerful man because
Hmm.
you've always been very grounded. You've never wavered on what you believe. And that's a very powerful place in life to be. So for me, in this moment in time, to hear you say, feeling like you're pushed around and not having a voice, that impacts me because I know you.
Yeah.
And so, how have you heard from any of your businesses or your tenants and what some of their perspectives or their stories are right now? And what are the prospects of some of them? I mean, we're officially in phase one,
Right.
effective last Friday. We know many of the businesses, restaurants, hotels can't open because even with those limitations, they wouldn't be able to make a profit.
Right.
So, what does that look like from your end, trying to help reinvigorate your clients, your customers, if you can? And what are some of the things you're concerned about as a developer if that doesn't go well?
Well, that's a really good point. Is that because because people maybe don't have a voice, or they don't feel like they have a sense that they can maybe take some risks in some of their decisions. What I'm seeing is some of them are holding back in a sense, I think almost waiting for other people to make the decisions and follow suit. And like you said, that's just not my style. That's not me at all. My style is, you know what, we're going to be the first to the race, first to the starting blocks, and the first to finish kind of a thing. So when phase one opened and the restaurants were like, well, maybe we'll wait a couple of weeks. We're really not sure. We're doing okay with the 2-man staff. It'd be like, no way, man. Blow the doors open. Put a big sign out. We are open for business. Take some of that momentum that's been pent up at home with stay at home and put some of that to use to put people back into your doors. And so, I'm feeling a little conflicted about some of those, what I would consider, I don't understand that kind of a fear because to me, I don't know where I learned this, but I taught my son this, and he's an entrepreneur as well. I said, here's the thing about fear. Fear, if you can imagine, is like a gate to the best pasture of your life you'll ever be. But that gate will never open unless you're willing to face the gate, either climb over it or break through it. That barrier of fear, right?
Mhm.
So I'm feeling like maybe some of the, the media dialogue and the narrative and all that has instilled a level of fear to people where they're really not willing to step out as quickly as I would like them to. So I think that's kind of what I'm struggling with now. Like, for example, some of our clients, I'm thinking, all right, I walk in there and I say, all right, the challenge to the Constitution is this, and the governor can't do this, and all these legal things I've been researching. So let's try opening like Friday and see what happens. And if push comes to shove, I'll be out front and I'll take the heat and get arrested for you because we should do this. And they're just like, well, they're just really complacent. That's kind of where my struggle is with it. And I'm hoping that I just, phase one, phase two, we don't even know what phase two looks like. Some of the regulations and the parameters haven't even been established for phase two. So to me, it's like, just give me a target and we can try to hit it, but quit moving the dang target.
Well, it is interesting, and this kind of conversation can seem tense to those that might hear it, but these are necessary components of this conversation. And I listened to the state spokeswoman this morning on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors meeting, and phase one we know is 3 weeks long, and if there's no complications, they're going to move into phase two. We do understand that the considerations and or the parameters have not been fully established as of yet, but they seem to be. It appears that they're going to be considerably different and should be very advantageous for businesses that can afford um, to move forward. I mean, I don't understand all the components of a restaurant and or a hotel, right? So I'm not when someone owns a restaurant says I won't make any money if unless I can open at full capacity,
Right.
immediately. There's a part of that conversation I understand, but because I'm not in that industry, there's parts of it I don't understand. And same thing with the hotel industry. I forget the proper name for it, but
Hospitality industry.
hospitality industry. Same thing with them. They need a certain amount of occupancy to be viable because the amount of money it takes to heat, cool, electricity, all of the things you talked about, all the expenses So it is really important, my wife's got a law practice here. She has her clients meeting, they meet at the door, they clean the mail, trying to follow all the safety restrictions or safety guidelines for everyone's sake. And it's hard, David. It's hard because we rent from John Highland, Highland Business Park in Springfield. His son and his daughter run the business. They've been very gracious, considerate, working with the businesses. I have no complaints with them as landlords. They have been very thoughtful towards every one of their tenants. But it's hard. It's hard to know in the context of this conversation that you and I are having right now, you, the developer, the landlord, business owner, we as business owners, tenants,
Right.
trying to balance of, well, we want to be smart, we want to be safe, but we got bills to pay too. So, I mean, what would you say to other business owners or other tenants or some of your tenants around some of these thought processes?
Well, I mean, the strain you describe is very accurate. Everybody's feeling the strain. I mean, the whole thing about, oh, we're in this together. I hate that slogan, but I mean, it's true. Landlords are in a strain, business owners are in a strain, customers are in a strain, suppliers are in a strain. And so the really only thing that can really help that is really good communication. And that's what I keep telling my people. You know what? Hey, this is today. If something changes for you, let me know about it. Because what I don't want to do is there's like the squeaky little leaky faucet that's been leaking for a week, and all of a sudden it's blowing a big old hole in the wall. And you finally call me and say, hey, there's a big hole in the wall. Can you come fix it? Hey, let me know when it starts to leak, and we can fix it then. So it's kind of the same attitude about people's business futures. Is let's just communicate. Any problem I have before me, I'm confident that between me and God will solve. But if I don't know it, I can't solve it. Me and God can't solve it. I mean, God knows about it, but I certainly don't. And I'm going to partner with him on this, okay? So help me out here. So just communication, I think, is really good. And I think, that communication has to be also foundationally put upon trust. I mean, you described that the Highlands are great people. I've known John and Sean, and Sean was my neighbor for a good number of years over in North Springfield. So and they're the same way. Good communication makes good relationships, makes good trust with good solutions.
Well, I appreciate what you said about landlords are business partners with the people that they rent to,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and how significant this other component of what you just mentioned regarding our responsibility as renters, tenants, to make sure we're communicating with our landlords, those that we have that kind of relationship with.
Yeah,
Because
the
we,
problem is that people have a real hard time. I'm sorry if interrupting, but people have a real hard time for uh, adjusting to the fact that that 12-pound conversation, it's heavy, but when it happens, it lightens the load.
Mhm. Yeah, we've been in constant contact with Sean and his sister, and they've been very gracious. No, they said, "Hey, this is new to all of us.
Yeah.
Just stay in contact, do what you can. You guys are good tenants. We want you here, kind of thing." And so it's been for us. It took that pressure off of, okay, this everything's crazy now, and now I'm going to get thrown out.
Right.
And
Right.
then you find out, no, they have no intention or any
Right.
desire to throw you out.
Yeah, well, I mean, look what that breeds, though. It almost breeds like, a band of brothers kind of atmosphere. Like, when you're in the trenches in war with somebody, doesn't matter where you're from or what your opinions are, what your political views are. If you fight the same battle and come out victorious in the end, then you have a relationship for life.
Hmm.
And, landlords don't want vacant buildings in a time like this. We would rather have somebody in there who's willing to stick out the fight and work together and make it work, because that makes I mean, think about how much stronger the team concept of community is when that happens between people. It's a great deal.
So, the governor enacted an executive order that says landlords cannot evict, in the midst of this pandemic. There's no policy regarding, as of right now, that's been written. For instance, for you as a landlord, that would say, okay, for those of your tenants that due to the pandemic are now in arrears for this amount, whatever it might be, there's no policy that would communicate to you as the landlord or communicate to your tenants. This is how we're going to help both parties recover.
Right.
This is how we're going to help both parties maintain viability as well as liquidity for their household and your extended household, so to speak, with your businesses. What could be done from a government perspective, regardless of the level, to help someone as a developer like you navigate what's going to come next?
Wow. So in other words, if I hear your question right, so if this thing persists on and it starts affecting us a lot harder on our bottom line where we can't pay our expenses and all that, how are they going to help us out as part of that equation of helping everybody else out? Yeah, that's a really good question, and I unfortunately don't have an answer for you. I know that fortunately for us, we're financially in our projects well. We're not overextended, and I think that's just comes from a foundation of good stewardship, which is a spiritual principle. So I think that and to be honest, I think some landlords and tenants like ourselves, we're just going to have to eat some. At some point, we may get to a point where how much can we eat and what are we willing to eat, and everybody's going to have to take a chunk and bite off and chew like crazy. And I think really, if I'm depending on the government to help me out in my business, then I shouldn't be in business.
Well, we got the people we get our mortgage from, they sent out this form letter and email to all of their clients and said that they had this program available that if you needed to go, if you couldn't make any house payments for whatever the time frame was, 3 months as the governor established, they would work. The forbearance is the word
Sure.
I'm looking for.
Right.
That if you needed to utilize their forbearance, it wouldn't count against you, but at the end of that forbearance period of 90 days, all 90 days would be due 100% on top of
Who has
what's,
that kind of cash?
yeah, who has that kind of cash. And so I wanted just to say that out loud to you, just to see, what your thoughts are. That seems even more ludicrous and
Right.
ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just setting people up to fail.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm totally on the same page with you. I mean, here's the thing: whenever it's always best to pay your bills because it always costs more if you don't. I mean, that's the general rule of thumb. And if they say, yeah, well, we'll forgive your mortgage or your car payment, well, they're still making interest on that, and it's just going to compound over time. The only thing I felt that I read, which is almost like a meme on Facebook, that really made any sense to me, was somebody said, why don't you just stop, have nothing done, and then just add 3 months on the end of the loan? Like, say if the term was 50 years, or 50 years, that's a bad loan. If the term was 50 months and you forbear 3 months, then now the term's 53 months and you didn't extend any more expenses in that. That seemed to make a lot of sense to me. It was so simple. It was like, well, okay, but nobody's done that. But yeah, it's even just for the tenant that I described, their plan now is to move out at the end of their lease, which is next couple weeks from now, and move in with the in-laws. And so now, let's say I think they're $1,200 behind now in their rent. So where does that come from? We have $1,000 security deposit. The law doesn't allow us to take back rent money out of security deposit. So there's a lot of limitations on the landlord of how to actually recover some of that money if it's recoverable at all.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just think some of us are going to take a big old bite of chunk and just take a big glass of water and swallow it.
If you could help craft a policy at the state level to help impact our economy, consumers on both sides, what might that look like for you based on your knowledge and experience?
Wow, I'm certainly out of league when I answer that question. I mean, there's a lot smarter people in the room than me on that one for sure. I think that the things that maybe have struck against us, I think, in trying to get a viable solution to this problem, and I hate to say this because I know I'm going to get backlash, but that extra $600 a week for unemployment made people not want to come back to work. I mean, there's a good many of our employees, like for example, that Monday when the pandemic hit and everything shut down, 100 people on our half block lost their jobs. 100 people, Mark, on a half block area. All right. So of those 100 people, the best way to get the economy and them back to a stable lifestyle is to get them reemployed so that they can come back and do their thing. Well, when you, as a government, throw an extra bunch of money at them, the motivation to come back is, you know, so now they're having to deal with, okay, so how do we discipline these people by, if we fire them, then they don't get employment. So it just become this, you know, enemy against enemy kind of mentality. So I think what has to happen is the government has to know how much to step in, because if we, and this is a concept I said earlier, if we lose our concept that we have skin in the game and the government's going to take care of us, then we lose that motivation and that passion to do what is going to help everyone. And what helps everyone is when people get back to work. That's what helps everyone. And so at the state level, I think, you know, if we just said that unemployment benefit lasted for just a very short period of time, like maybe a month, just to get you kind of over the hump, and then it's like, all right, now we're back to reality. Let's figure it out. And if the state would, the whole thing about, you know, what's essential business is not, it's really got my bums in a twist. Because, you know, there's a lot of businesses, every business is essential in my opinion. Every single business is essential because it establishes and supports another family and another layer of the community. So that I think is what's really holding us back, is just some of the policies that and executive orders that we're under that have just kept the solution from taking care of itself in a sense, getting people back to work.
Yeah, I've heard from other business owners that that's been part of the struggle, is those that are receiving the amount of benefits that they're receiving.
Right.
Now, I think that they were done with the best of intentions in regards to making sure people's families didn't fail. I believe that that was probably part of that, but it's hard to understand. You know, this is what I'm talking about. There's this side of it, but then there's this whole other side of the picture of,
Right.
now we can get back to work, and but now this component, this piece of it isn't ready to recommit, because now there are benefits that say I don't really have to do that right now. And I'm not putting either side down. I
Sure.
think that
Sure.
there are legitimate reasons on both sides to hold their ground and or stand their ground. I went to IHOP the other night. We took my family to IHOP. Why? Because I'll be 56 in a week, and I get to order off the 55 plus menu now, and I save
Pancakes are half price.
yeah, and so I save $3 a plate, and then I got a 7-year-old daughter, and she eats for free Monday through Sunday, 4 to 7.
And you better not put this out. People are asking you for coupons.
Yeah. So we went to IHOP, and the young lady that served us, we asked her how she was doing. And I asked her, "Are you getting a lot of hours right now? Has this been good for you and your family?" And she said, "Well, I am. I'm going to get more than 40 hours this week, because most of the other my coworkers, they don't have childcare, plus they're homeschooling their children
Mm,
right now.
right.
So there's a few of us that don't have kids that can be here. So we're the ones working right now." So
Right.
there's that piece of
Right.
that puzzle. I mean, I'm doing the homeschooling myself, you know, because my wife's usually here at her office plugging away, trying to keep her practice alive.
Hmm.
There's just a lot of variables.
Right. There's a lot of variables, and that's something that's not even on my plate. My kids are grown and gone. So,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, that whole homeschool thing with kids is, and that's what happens. Like, you know, I've got a nephew of mine she's a sterilization tech at Slocum. And so she's home now. That whole income is gone, and she's had to. Hey, did your battery run out?
No, I don't know what happened. You were talking, then the screen froze.
Yeah, that's what you did. Okay, well, look, we won't blame each other then. Blame that internet.
Yeah. So yeah, you were talking, the screen froze. You were frozen, but I could still hear your voice. And then it just,
Oh, wow. Well, I'm good. Well, did that, so did the voice record? Yeah. So there's an element of that whole home care, child care thing. It's just, you know, and by not having like child care stuff essential, I mean, you know, and I get that this is a serious thing, but, you know, in my mind, you know, and there's my politics again speaking, so I might maybe out of turn here, is just like, there's certain areas of the country that were super hardly affected, New York, but here at Lane County, we've had two deaths, one attributed to a heart failure and one attributed to actual COVID. And it's like, we still as Americans, I mean, let's reel back a year ago. If I was sick and had the flu, I had the choice to go out to a restaurant and sneeze on somebody and infect them. I had that choice. I still have that choice today. And so I'm thinking like, what happened to those self-governing, self-sensible kinds of actions? All of a sudden now we've been accused of not being smart people anymore, not having, a social conscience or, common sense. So yeah, that's my other hot button I struggle with. It's like, people have, we can go to Walmart. I can have more people at church in the plumbing section of Home Depot than I can at my own church. That drives me crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of this entire, when you mentioned good steward, and I'm back and forth on a lot of the policies, but ultimately I come back to I don't know how much of this is real or not real.
Right. Yeah.
There's something out there, David, is infecting people, and
Right.
people are dying from it, and we don't see it. It's airborne, all of these things. And so I just want to be a good steward of all of this and help us all get through this as fast as we can.
Right.
That's my perspective
Right.
and my wife's perspective. And so it is tough because I listen to both sides. I have agreements and disagreements with both sides.
Yep.
And so ultimately I'm in the place where, well, I want to try to be as smart and safe as possible because I don't want to be the cause of someone else might get sick or some of that. So it is hard, and it's good to have this conversation.
Well, and the good thing you said right there is I think one of the uh, foundational fears that most people have. I spoke to one of my tenants the other day who runs a yoga studio. Well, you're not wheezing and coughing, and I mean, you're sweating a little bit in the yoga place, but I mean, the fact of transmission in the yoga studio, you're usually 6 feet apart anyway, because your mats don't touch and so on and so forth. But, he was really concerned with that. And he articulated almost the exact thing you just said. I don't want to be responsible for somebody coming into my shop, working out, infecting someone else and someone else dying. That would be my fault. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. When did we adopt that kind of thinking that just the risk of being alive, if you will, is somehow my fault if that risk turns sour to another person, unless I have malicious intent?
Mhm.
I mean, what would have stopped someone to come into my place of business as a photographer? I do a headshot, I have a little sniffle, and they catch the flu, and because they have some underlying health conditions, they die. Is that my fault? Well, no, it's not my fault, because we both agreed as citizens of this world to risk whatever there was outside of our doors and walk outside.
Mhm.
And I think we've lost that perspective a little bit, because this narrative that we've been fed is somehow, if you don't wear a mask in the grocery store, then you don't care about me. Well, I do care about you. Well, what I know about a mask is maybe I shouldn't be wearing a mask. And what I also know is that I want to be part of herd immunity. I'm not the age where I can crawl around on Costco's floor and get my immunity that way, but I want to go in there without a mask and shop and be okay. If I get sick, I stay home.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my politics, but anyway, whatever. I hear what you're saying. It is. It's really tough because, as a pastor too, I got to be empathetic toward people that are really, really afraid. How do I, as a pastor, talk to people about their fears? And I talk to people in Uganda all the time. Uganda's got a heck of a lockdown. We've started food banks over there because people just can't eat. And they're really fearful about what's happening in the future. So we, as individuals, have to be empathetic toward the feelings of another. But at the same time, like I said before, we have to be self-responsible and community responsible about how we act.
Mhm. Well, it is tough. I serve on the board of directors for the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, HIV Alliance, Springfield City Club. And so I try to be mindful of all of those leadership roles that I have submitted myself to, and that it matters. It
Right.
matters how I support the work of the other board members of the chamber, especially our CEO, how I support the executive director and the other board members of the HIV Alliance and the community that we serve, the other board of directors and the members of the Springfield City Club, these other community leaders that come together for the good of the community. And I'm trying to maintain sense of, as you said, about being in the foxhole.
Hmm.
And I know there's that within those groups, there's people with different opinions. We all don't agree or believe the same thing, but trying to maintain a sense of locked arms, if you will, for
Right.
the sake of our community. And it's hard, for all of us.
Sense of
So,
locked arms, 6 feet apart.
yeah, you're such
Sorry,
a,
I couldn't resist. That was just
I,
laying on the floor.
I hear you, brother. That was kind of funny. So, all right. So, if you had any final comments, just for people to know, to hear um, from your perspective, what all of this means, what would you say to this audience? Let's say in this audience you're speaking to, there's the governor and her staff, the city council, the mayor, city staff, your fellow residents, your family, your church members. What would you say to them about where we're at right now?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I got a number of different tributaries we can flow down that river. Um, well, to the governor, if I'm going to single somebody out, I'd say, hey, let's follow the Constitution. Okay, let's really figure out what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how it affects everybody from every level. I mean, just the one level that I heard the other day was a friend of mine said that 70% of child abuse cases are reported via the school system. Okay, so if we take people out of school, does that mean 70% of the child abuse cases are now going to go undetected? And we're going to have that generation of kids that went through this pandemic, and we're going to have that problem to deal with? So, I mean, there's a multi-layer issue to that. The second thing is I'm going to get back to work as soon as we can. And if you're fearful of coming out, don't come out. Have your right to stay home. Uh, come out when you think it's safe. Test the waters as you feel the waters need to be tested. But for the rest of us, let us take some of that risk and push forward like we would normally do, because we're people that are willing to take risks and push forward. Now, some people would say, well, you're risking the entire community. I don't necessarily believe that, because I don't really think that we're risking any more than we did a year ago. And that's just my opinion. I mean, the flu, well, just for example, 2 people have died in Lane County. I bet 2 people have died crossing crosswalks in Lane County in the same amount of time period. Now, we're not closing down crosswalks and rephasing those in over a 3-phase period. So there's risks to living. The second thing I say, maybe spiritually, to people is that, my day to die has already been appointed. There's nothing, if I go parachuting tomorrow or motorcycle riding, it doesn't affect the day I die. That's already been appointed by the Almighty. And so for me to live my life in a fear that I'm going to do something to bring that to pass sooner, and from a spiritual perspective, I think needs kind of a gut check. Okay. And just from a community standard, I think, like you said, if we could all decide to fight this on whatever level we're comfortable at fighting it, that we should. There's going to be people that are snipers in the war that fight a certain way. There's guys that are infantry that are the ones that yell and run forward first, and then there's those that come up from behind with the tanks and they reinforce. Let's identify, at least try to identify, what our roles are in this, and allow each person to use their gift and role. And I think that's kind of what is hard for me to also digest, is we're trying to make everybody's role the same and everybody's reaction and response the same. And I just don't think that's the way to solve the problem. Hope
Well,
that answers your question.
well, no, it did. What I really appreciate about this conversation right now is that it's so multi-layered for so many different reasons for all of us. And if we're not having dialogue, if we're not having, presenting the platform to hear what the other side, the other person, the other, point, counterpoint, right, kind of thing, right? In all fairness to everyone, then
Right.
how do we help our, within our differences, but also within our skill sets, help our community move forward and help our economy recover if
Right.
we're not taking all these things into consideration?
Yeah, I think some of the thing is, let's not invent a problem that doesn't exist yet.
Hmm.
It's always the what if. I mean, the whole like, oh, we're going to overwhelm the hospital problem. Okay, well, that didn't happen. And so, okay, well, we can't open up anything because what if we overwhelm the hospital again? Well, we didn't do that in the first place. So that preparing for what if to what, hey, let's get to the problem. If we face it, then let's figure it out. So that's what I think we should do. And, my partner and I, we were moving forward on another project downtown. Like I said before earlier in the conversation, Springfield, in my experience, has always been the first to suffer in a downturn and the last to succeed. And by gosh, if I have any influence in this downturn, we're going to get back to success as soon as we can, because I just I don't want to live in downtown Springfield another 8 years and watch it decay, you
Right.
know? So that's where we're at.
Very good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've really enjoyed this hour with David Loveall, and you've heard some of his perspectives, his impassioned perspectives, and it's important. It's important we give one another voice to share those perspectives. It's important that we uh, take into consideration seriously and thoughtfully the opinions of others, the efforts of others, the sacrifices of others. And this conversation with David he's a developer, he's a landlord, he's a pastor, he's a veteran. He was raised and grown up here in Springfield. He worked downtown Springfield as a young man, as a teenager. He is greatly invested in the health and well-being of the community as a whole. And it's great that he has a different opinion, and it's great that he was able to share some of those perspectives today so that all of us can consider what one another has to say and pull together. David, thank you for making time. I know you've got some vacation time in Arizona, you and your lovely bride, and much needed.
And 40 years, lovely bride. Look at that.
Congratulations. That's right. 40-year lovely bride. And so be safe, come back safe. And we look forward to your next project and your next development in downtown Springfield.
So do we. Mark, thank you for what you do and the voice that you create in downtown. You're a great businessman. I wish you all the best in your MBA that just launches you to the next ladder, way ahead of the next wall you're trying to climb. So good for you, bud.
Very good. Thank you. You guys, God bless you, and we'll see you when you get back.
Okay, take care. See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.